I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. Honestly, who would? But here I am trying to piece together what's left of my marriage after last year's Christmas party. It was supposed to be festive, filled with laughter, good wine, and awkward office karaoke. Instead, it turned into the catalyst for everything I never saw coming. My wife Emma and I had been together for 8 years. We got married young, built a life, and I thought we were solid. She had her flaws, she could be distant, sometimes caught up in work, but I figured that was normal. She was beautiful, smart, funny, worth every minute I spent loving her. We had a rhythm, a routine, nothing extraordinary but enough. Then the party happened. I wasn't there, I'd been out of town on a business trip. Emma said she was going with some colleagues and I trusted her. She had this thing about keeping a busy social life. I'd never doubted her until I saw the photos. It was her best friend, Lisa, who accidentally sent me the pictures. She meant to send them to someone else, but somehow they landed in my inbox. I remember the moment I saw the first image. My stomach dropped like I'd been punched. Emma in a tight black dress, her hair falling in soft waves, her face lit up with that familiar smile. But next to her, her boss, Richard, with his arm around her waist, pulling her close. They looked like they were in their own world, completely ignoring everyone else. The second photo hit me harder. Emma's face pressed against his shoulder, her eyes closed like she was lost in the moment. His hand was firmly on her hip and their bodies were pressed together as if they'd been caught in the act. The caption beneath the photo read, "Best Christmas party ever. Sorry, not sorry, Richard and I have some celebrating to do." That last part was Lisa's sarcastic note, meant as a joke, but it felt like a punch in the gut. I stared at the screen, my palms sweaty. My mind raced. How long had this been going on? Did she lie to me? Did she think I'd never find out? I knew her friends teased her sometimes about her flirtatious side, but I'd always brushed it off as harmless. Now, it all seemed different. I remember sitting in my hotel room just holding my phone, trembling. The world around me blurred. The room wasn't loud, but I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I kept flipping back and forth between the photos, trying to find some explanation that made sense. But the truth was, I'd known something was off lately. Little things. Her phone buzzing constantly, her being secretive about her phone. She'd stay late at work or meetings, even when she'd promised she'd be home early. I'd caught her in tiny lies. Oh, I just bumped into Lisa at the grocery store, or Richard just asked me to help with a project. But I'd never suspected it was this. Never thought she'd betray me like that with her boss, no less. The guy she'd always said was a work hero, but who I'd always felt rubbed me the wrong way. The one who, let's be honest, always looked at her a little too long with that predatory smirk. That night, I felt like I'd been kicked in the stomach. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but instead I just sat there shaking. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. I couldn't believe she'd been cheating on me, and with someone I knew she'd had a professional thing with, but never thought it would turn into this. I've never been a vengeful guy. I'm not the kind to jump into revenge out of spite. But I knew one thing: Emma's betrayal had cut too deep. If I let this go, I'd never trust her again. And I didn't want to be naive anymore. I went to bed that night with 1,000 thoughts swirling in my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face in those photos. I could feel my jaw tight and my fists clench. I told myself I'd figure this out. I'd find out everything. But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling in the dark, I knew I needed a plan. I couldn't just confront her blindly. I had to make sure I was ready for whatever came next. And I was already thinking about revenge, cold, calculated, and fitting for the betrayal I was feeling. I had to. Because I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not without consequences. Not without making her understand just how badly she'd hurt me. Next morning, I woke up with a heavy knot in my stomach. The images from the night before were still burned into my mind, and I felt like I was carrying a stone that grew heavier with every breath. I needed answers, but first I had to get my head straight. I couldn't go into this blinded by rage or heartbreak. I had to be strategic. I brewed a strong coffee, the bitter aroma waking me up a bit, but the anger still simmered beneath the surface. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone, debating my next move. I knew Emma would be at work already, probably thinking I didn't know anything. Maybe she thought I'd never find out, or maybe she just didn't care. Either way, I needed to gather evidence, proof of her betrayal and proof that I knew. I started by digging into her phone. She kept everything on her device: texts, emails, photos. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't resist. I cracked her passcode, something I'd never done before. I felt like I was invading her privacy, but honestly, at that moment, I didn't care. I needed to know the full story. Scrolling through her messages, I saw nothing suspicious. Yet, just some flirtatious banter with her friends, work stuff, reminders for shopping. Then I found a message from Richard. It was late last night after the party, and it read, "Had a great time tonight. Can't wait to see you again. Let's plan a little getaway." My stomach twisted. That confirmed what I saw in the photos, but it also showed she was still actively communicating with him, even after I'd seen everything. I felt my jaw tight. I was on the verge of losing it, but I forced myself to breathe. I needed more. I needed physical evidence to confront her, something concrete, undeniable. An affair was one thing, but proof in writing, in photos, that she had crossed a line that could ruin her career and our marriage if I played it right. I remembered Lisa's teasing about the photos. She often joked about how Emma and Richard had a thing, but I never thought she was serious. Now I knew better. I needed to find those photos myself, or at least some other proof. I checked her email, her cloud storage, even her social media. Nothing yet. I had to think smarter. I decided to pay a visit to Richard's office. I knew his routine, and I knew they'd be working late today. My plan was simple: get a look at him, observe his reactions, and maybe get some insight. I wasn't planning violence, just enough to make him realize I wasn't someone to mess with. Late afternoon, I parked outside his building. The air was cold, sharp enough to cut through my coat. I felt my palms sweat as I approached the front door. I had to be careful. I didn't want to blow my cover too early. I'd come prepared, wearing a casual jacket, sunglasses, and a calm facade. Inside, I observed him from a distance as he sat at his desk, typing away. He looked confident, unbothered, like he'd already won some game he didn't fully understand was about to blow up in his face. I kept to the shadows, watching. Then I saw Emma's name pop up on his screen. A message: "Ready for tonight." My stomach clenched. This wasn't just a fling, it was something more serious. I had what I needed. Now I had to decide how I'd deliver my own version of justice. Back home, I started preparing my plan. It wasn't about destroying her, at least not yet. It was about making her see she'd crossed a line she couldn't come back from. I wasn't a man to act purely out of impulse, but I sure as hell wasn't going to let her think she could cheat and get away with it. I gathered the evidence I had: screenshots, notes I'd taken on her habits, snippets of conversations. I had to be meticulous. I decided I'd confront her with everything, face to face, but in a way that would leave her no room to deny. I'd make her understand that her betrayal wasn't just a mistake. It was a full-blown scandal waiting to explode. The tricky part was timing. I wanted her to feel vulnerable, maybe even guilty, before I dropped the bomb. That meant waiting until the right moment. I'd keep everything close for now, but I knew one thing: I was done being the naive husband who looked the other way. Emma had pushed me to the edge, and I wasn't going to back down. I sat in my kitchen, feeling the weight of everything. My fingers clenched around a coffee mug, and I thought about how I'd do this. How do you confront someone you loved and trusted after discovering they've been cheating? It's a question I didn't have a clear answer for, but I knew one thing: I wouldn't go quietly. Emma had already broken the trust. Now I was about to break her illusion of control. And that's when I realized this isn't just about revenge. It's about reclaiming myself. She made her choice, but I'd make mine, loud and clear. The game was on. I spent the next few days buried in plans. Every time I thought about Emma, those photos, her texts, I could feel a flicker of rage rising, but I knew I had to keep my cool. Revenge, I figured, was all about patience and precision. I couldn't let her see me sweat. Not yet. I started setting traps, little things primarily, ways to get her to reveal herself further without me having to say a word. I kept my phone close, monitoring her schedule when she went to work. I even enlisted Lisa, her best friend, under the guise of asking about a gift for Emma. She wasn't suspicious. She thought I was just trying to make peace, maybe get some closure. Little did she know I was gathering ammunition. One evening, Emma called me. I answered, trying to sound normal, but I could tell she was tense. "Hey," she said, her voice a little shaky. Can we talk? I kept my tone even. Of course, what's going on? There was a pause. Then she blurted, I know about the photos. Lisa accidentally sent them to you, didn't she? My stomach tightened. It was time to play it cool. Yeah, I saw them. Emma, I never thought you'd do this. With Richard, of all people, I thought we had something real. Silence on the line, I could almost hear her breathing. I pressed on. Did you ever think about how this would feel, cheating on me, lying about it? I mean, I was out of town, trusting you to be honest. And you're out there doing this, I said, voice thick with a mix of hurt and anger. She finally responded, voice trembling. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, it just did. It was a mistake, okay? I was drunk, it was a stupid moment, and I regret it, but I love you and I don't want to lose what we have. I scoffed softly. Love? Is that why you're sneaking around, lying and hooking up with your boss? If you loved me, you wouldn't be doing this behind my back. She broke down then, sobbing. Please, I'll fix this. I swear, just give me a chance. That's when I knew I had her exactly where I wanted her. She was vulnerable, desperate, and her defenses were down. I had to be careful. Let her think she still had some control, but I was already planning my next move. The next day, I decided to pay Richard a visit again. No more lurking. This time, I'd come with a clear plan. I wanted to see his reaction face to face, just enough to make him understand that I'd uncovered everything and that I wasn't going to let this slide. I parked my car outside his office building and took a deep breath. The cold air hit my face, sharpening my focus. I walked in casually as if I didn't have a care in the world. Inside, Richard was at his desk talking on the phone. I approached him smoothly. Richard, I said, voice calm but firm, can we have a word? He looked up surprised. Sure, who's this? I kept my tone level. I'm here to talk about Emma. His eyes narrowed. What about her? I know about the affair, I said bluntly. I saw the photos and I know about the messages, and I want you to know I'm not a man who takes betrayal lightly. He chuckled, a little nervous. Look, I don't know what you think you've got. I've got enough, I interrupted. If you think you're going to keep this quiet, you're wrong. I've got proof and I plan to use it. He leaned back, trying to act confident. You're making a mistake. Emma and I, save it, I cut him off. This isn't just about your little affair, it's about respect. And I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. I turned on my heel and walked out, feeling my heart pounding. I knew I had to be patient. This was just the beginning. I had what I needed to blow everything open. Back home, I sat in the quiet, replaying everything. I'd gathered enough evidence now, but I didn't want to rush. I wanted Emma to see the full scope of what was coming. I knew her, and I knew she'd try to deny, to bargain, to cling. But the truth was out there, and I'd make her face it. I was ready to confront her. When the moment came, I planned to lay it all bare. No more hiding, no more pretending. I'd give her one last chance to be honest, then I'd decide what the next step was. Because at this point, I wasn't just fighting for my marriage, I was fighting for my dignity. And I wasn't going to let her take that away without a fight. The days that followed felt like walking on a razor's edge. Every moment I spent waiting was filled with a mix of anticipation and rage. I knew Emma was trying to act normal, but I could see the cracks in her facade. The way she avoided my eyes, the way she kept fiddling with her phone, it all screamed guilt. I wasn't about to give her a moment's peace, not until I was ready. I kept my plan close, but I also started making moves to escalate the situation. I knew I couldn't confront her directly until I had everything set. That meant more digging, more evidence, and a little bit of psychological chess. I wanted her to feel the sting of knowing I was one step ahead. One night she came home late, smelling of perfume and something else, an excuse I knew was a lie. I sat on the couch, watching her, trying to gauge her mood. She looked anxious, her eyes darting around the room like she was preparing for a showdown. She finally sat down next to me, her voice trembling. Can we talk, please? I kept my tone neutral. Go ahead. She hesitated, then blurted, I'm sorry about everything. I know I messed up. I don't want to lose you. I love you. I really do. I looked at her, feeling the familiar rush of anger. Do you? Because from where I stand, it looks like you've been lying to my face for months. She looked down, tears welling up. It was a mistake. I was lonely, confused. Richard, it just happened. I didn't mean for things to get out of control, I swear. I clenched my fists, feeling my blood boil. That's bullshit. You knew exactly what you were doing. You were flirting with him at the office, then you took it further at that damn party. And now you're trying to act like it's nothing. Her voice cracked. "Please, I'll do anything, just don't leave me, I can fix this." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I wasn't about to blow my cover yet. I had my own game to play. Instead of yelling, I leaned closer, voice low and steady. "Fix it. You think you can just apologize and everything goes back to normal? No, you crossed a line, Emma, and I've got proof. I know about the messages, about the plans for that getaway. How long has this been going on?" She looked away, silent. I watched the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers clenched in her lap. "I want the truth," I said softly. "Right now." She finally looked at me, eyes glassy. "Since last summer." Around the time, Richard started asking me out more often. I thought I was just being flirted with. But it turned into more. I was stupid. That's when I knew I had her completely rattled. She was broken, vulnerable, the perfect moment. I decided to push a little harder but carefully. "Why?" I asked. "Why did you do it? What was missing for you?" She looked at her hands, voice trembling. "I don't know. I felt invisible here, like I wasn't enough anymore. Richard made me feel alive again. I never meant to hurt you. I just lost myself for a little while." I felt my stomach turn. That was her excuse, her weakness, but I knew better. She'd betrayed me, and now I had to decide what to do next. I kept quiet for a moment, letting her stew in her own guilt. Then I stood up, feeling my heart hammering in my chest. I wanted her to see I wasn't just some fool to be manipulated. "You need to think about what this means," I said, voice cold. "Because I'm not sure I can forgive you, but I want time, and when I'm ready, we'll talk again." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "Please don't leave me. I'll do anything." I stared at her, feeling the weight of her tears and my own silent fury. I knew this wasn't the end, not yet. I had one more step to take before I'd finally reveal my hand. And when I did, she'd wish she'd never crossed me. That night I sat on the porch, staring at the dark sky, feeling the cool night air on my face. I knew I had her cornered, but I also knew I had to be careful. Revenge was a game of patience, and I was just getting started. Emma's betrayal had set this whole chain in motion, but I had the power now. The next move was mine to make, and I was ready to strike. The days that followed were a strange mix of waiting and planning. I kept everything close to my chest, watching Emma from a distance while carefully tightening my web. I knew she was teetering on the edge of panic, and I wanted her to feel it. The more vulnerable she appeared, the more I could control when I finally struck. One evening, she called me again. Her voice was shaky, like she was desperate. "Can we meet? I need to talk face to face," she begged. I hesitated, then agreed. It was time to confront her directly, but I had to do it on my terms. I told her I'd come to her place the next night. I wanted her to think I was giving her a chance to explain herself, but really I was making sure she was cornered. That night, I parked 2 blocks away from her apartment. I wore my usual casual jacket, but underneath I was tense. My hands were clammy and my stomach was doing somersaults. I entered quietly, finding her sitting on the couch, her face streaked with tears, clutching a tissue. "I'm here," I said softly, closing the door behind me. She looked up instantly. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't know what else to do. I took a breath, trying to suppress the rage. "Emma, I've heard enough. I've seen the photos, the messages. You've been lying to me for months." Her eyes widened. "Please, I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I was stupid, I was weak. I thought I could fix it, but I can't. I love you." That phrase made my stomach churn. I leaned forward, voice steady but icy. "You love me. You think your words can fix what you've destroyed. You betrayed everything we had, and you think saying I love you makes it okay." Her lips trembled. "It's not okay. I know I screwed up. I want to make it right. I'll do whatever it takes." I looked at her, struggling with the urge to explode. Instead, I kept my tone sharp. "You want to make it right? Here. What's going to happen? You're going to pack your bags. You're leaving tonight. You're going to stay with Lisa while I figure out what to do next." Her eyes filled with even more tears. "Please don't do this. I'll go to counseling. I'll fix everything. Just don't throw everything away." I shook my head slowly. "You already threw everything away when you crossed that line. I'm not stupid. I know about the plans with Richard, about the getaway she was planning behind my back, and I've got the proof." I pulled out my phone, showing her the screenshots I'd taken. Every message, every photo, every lie she told herself she could hide. Her face paled and she looked like she might collapse. "Don't you see? I said, voice low, you can't fix this. What you did is unforgivable, and I've got a plan, one you won't like, but it's the only way I'll ever feel like I got some justice. She looked at me, eyes wide with shock. What are you going to do? I let the silence hang there. You're leaving tonight, and when you're gone, I'm going to do something that will make sure you pay for what you've done. You'll regret the day you ever crossed me. Her hands shook as she tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. I saw her realize she was defeated, that the game was over. I turned to leave, my mind already racing about how to execute the next phase of my plan. As I reached the door, she called out softly, please don't do this. I'll fix everything, just give me a chance. I paused, looked back, and said, you had your chance, but you threw it away. The only thing left now is your shame. I stepped out into the night, knowing I was finally taking control. I had the evidence, the plan, and most importantly, the resolve. Emma's betrayal had cut deep, but I was about to make sure she paid a price she'd never forget. And as I drove away, I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming what was mine, the dignity she tried to destroy, and I was going to see it through. The next morning, I woke up with a strange calm I hadn't felt in days. I'd been up all night, executing the last piece of my plan. Emma was gone, her bags packed, her face pale with shock. I'd handed her the keys, told her to leave, and made sure she understood that this was the end. She looked at me with wide eyes, tears still streaming, desperation in her voice, but I didn't waver. I didn't want her to think I was angry just to satisfy my pride. This wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about finally standing up after she'd shattered everything I believed in. I had no more patience for lies, betrayal, or pretending that what we once shared hadn't been tainted. I sat alone in the quiet afterward, feeling the weight lift. But also a strange emptiness settle in. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, took a long sip, and stared out the window. The house felt different, silent, colder. I knew I'd never trust her again, and honestly, that was fine. I'd never want to again. I started reflecting on how I got here, how I let her cross every line and still hoped she'd come back, how I ignored the subtle red flags that turned into blatant betrayals. I thought about the nights I'd spent lying awake, wondering if I was enough. Turns out I was. She just didn't see it until she lost everything. Now I was finally free from the cycle of lies and betrayal, not because I wanted revenge, but because I'd realized I deserved better. I deserved honesty, respect, and someone who wouldn't cheat behind my back. And I'd found the strength to walk away, no matter how bitter it felt in the moment. Looking back, I know there are lessons here I couldn't ignore. Trust is fragile. Once broken, it's nearly impossible to fix. And revenge, it's a double-edged sword. It gave me a temporary sense of justice, but what truly set me free was reclaiming my dignity and choosing to move on. I handed the keys to the lawyer that day, filed for divorce, cut off contact completely. I didn't want her to have any hold over me anymore. I wanted her to see that her actions had consequences, real, tangible consequences, that she couldn't just cheat, lie, and expect everything to go back to normal. And I realized something else that finally felt right. I was better off without her. I was stronger than I thought, and I'd survived her betrayal. The pain still lingers, but it's dulled now, replaced by a quiet sense of resolve. So if you're ever in a similar situation, here's my advice. Don't let it eat you up. Confront what's real, gather your strength, and don't be afraid to walk away. Revenge might seem satisfying in the moment, but true liberation comes from knowing you've taken back control of your life. Emma's betrayal was a chapter I'd never want to rewrite, but it taught me that sometimes the only way to truly heal is to let go. And that's exactly what I did. I closed that door on her and I stepped into the future, alone but finally free.